I still remember the moment my world shattered, when the person I trusted most, my best friend, stole away the woman I loved. The shock hit me like a tidal wave. My rich fiancé, the promise of a dazzling future, was no longer mine but belonged to someone I called brother. In that instant, my heart splintered into 1,000 shards, each one reflecting a betrayal too profound to comprehend. For a decade, I wrestled with the bitter sting of loss and humiliation, and then, in a cruel twist of fate, he had the nerve to mock my single status. But fate, as it would have it, had more in store, because that same man, with his arrogant sneer, eventually saw my wife. I was 17 when I first met Jason, my best friend since childhood. We shared everything, our dreams, our secrets, even our ambitions. When I met Victoria at a summer gala, her beauty and grace captivated me instantly. With her sparkling wit and a promise of a life adorned with luxuries I'd only dared to imagine, she quickly became my fiancée. We planned a future of success, adventure, and love. I believed our bond, sealed by years of friendship and romance, was unbreakable. But life, as I learned the hard way, is never as simple as it seems. As Victoria and I began planning our wedding and discussing the bright future ahead, Jason's behavior subtly shifted. What began as offhand comments and unexplained absences slowly morphed into suspicious glances and whispered conversations. I remember one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of melancholy, I caught Jason and Victoria in a private moment. Their laughter, once innocent, now carried an undercurrent of intimacy that pierced my soul. I felt betrayed in a way that words can scarcely describe. The revelation came crashing down on me like a runaway freight train. One fateful night, I confronted Victoria about the growing distance between us. She denied everything, but the evidence was there in the stolen moments, in the shared secrets I was never privy to. My best friend, the one person I had trusted above all others, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. The pain was indescribable. I lost not only the woman I thought was my future but also the friendship that had been my anchor since childhood. 4 years after that betrayal, I wandered through life feeling adrift, burdened by the weight of my shattered dreams and a loneliness that gnawed at my every waking moment. I threw myself into work, traveled to far-off places in search of solace, and even attempted to rebuild a semblance of a social life, but nothing filled the void. Every time I saw a happy couple, every time I witnessed love in its simplest form, I was reminded of what I had lost. My heart became a fortress, barricaded against further hurt, yet painfully aware of the cost. Time, however, has a peculiar way of softening even the deepest wounds. 10 years passed, a decade of introspection, heartbreak, and personal reinvention. I had learned to live with the scars, to turn my pain into lessons that sculpted the person I was becoming. In that time, I had journeyed from a man defined by betrayal to one who embraced his solitude as a chance for growth. I even dared to venture into the realm of new relationships, though none could erase the memory of that crushing loss. Then came the night that would upend the delicate balance I had painstakingly built. At an exclusive charity gala, a glittering affair where old acquaintances mingled amid laughter and champagne, I unexpectedly encountered Jason. He was as charming as ever, with that same cocky glint in his eye that once had signaled our unbreakable bond. I stood on the periphery, observing him as he regaled a small crowd with tales of his success and the luxurious life he now led. The irony was almost too much to bear. Here was the man who had once stolen my future, now openly mocking my single status as if it were a trivial footnote in his own grand narrative. I had long ceased to care about his opinions, having learned that validation must come from within. Yet as I watched him, a surge of old wounds mixed with a newfound defiance welled up inside me. I knew I could no longer allow his mockery to define who I was. I resolved then and there that the pain he inflicted upon me would not have the final word in my life. I was determined to reclaim my story, to transform my scars into symbols of strength, and, in a way I had never anticipated, to find love again. Months later, after the gala and countless sleepless nights filled with both anger and quiet contemplation, my path took an unexpected turn. I met her on a rainy afternoon at a local art exhibit, a woman whose eyes held a depth of understanding that resonated with my own hidden sorrows. Her name was Elena, and from the moment our conversations began, I felt an inexplicable connection, as if our souls recognized each other from a time when love was simpler and unburdened by betrayal. Elena was not rich in the conventional sense. Her wealth lay in her compassion, her resilience, and an unwavering spirit that had endured its own share of heartache. As our relationship blossomed, I discovered that Elena had her own stories of loss and redemption. We spent long evenings discussing art, literature, and the transformative power of forgiveness. With her, I began to see that my past, with all its bitter twists and turns, was not a chain that bound me to sorrow but a tapestry that had enriched me with empathy and strength. Elena's love was gentle and fierce at the same time, an embrace that made the old wounds ache less and the future seem bright with possibility. Yet even as I started to build this new life, the memory of Jason's betrayal lingered like an unwelcome ghost. Every time I heard his name, a shudder would pass through me, a visceral reminder of the pain I had endured. But I no longer allowed that pain to dictate my happiness. I was learning to see the beauty in my journey, to acknowledge the hurt without letting it consume the hope that was steadily taking root in my heart. Then, in a twist of fate I could scarcely believe, I encountered Jason again, this time in a place I never expected, at the doorstep of my own home. It was a crisp autumn evening when I returned from one of Elena's art shows, feeling the warmth of her affection still lingering like a soft glow. As I approached the front door, I saw him standing there, his expression a blend of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite place. He had come uninvited, a bold intrusion into the sanctuary I had created with Elena. "Surprised to see me?" he said, his tone laced with a mixture of mockery and curiosity. For a brief moment time stood still. I could see the remnants of our shared past in his eyes, the laughter, the promises, the betrayal, but I was no longer the man who had once crumbled beneath his deceit. I met his gaze steadily, my voice calm but resolute. "I see you, Jason. I see everything you thought would make you superior now. But look at me, I'm not single anymore. I have found a love that you never understood, and I'm building a life richer than any you could ever imagine." The look on his face shifted subtly, a flicker of something like regret or perhaps envy. For a long, uncomfortable minute, the silence between us spoke louder than any harsh words could. Then, with a derisive smirk, he turned on his heel and left, disappearing into the night as abruptly as he had reappeared. Standing there in the doorway, I felt a surge of triumph, not over him, but over the painful past that had once defined me. I realized that the wounds inflicted by betrayal had, in time, become the very source of my strength. Elena's love had mended parts of me I thought were irreparably broken, and in doing so, had shown me that the path to true happiness was forged not in the absence of pain, but in the courage to overcome it. That night, as I closed the door behind me and joined Elena in the soft glow of our living room, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a quiet assurance that my journey had led me exactly where I needed to be. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had transformed, through pain and perseverance, into the catalyst for a future filled with hope and love. My story is far from over. The scars remain as vivid reminders of the past, yet they no longer serve as anchors dragging me down. Instead, they are the foundation upon which I build my new life, a life that defies the cruelty of betrayal and celebrates the unexpected beauty of resilience. As I look forward to the days yet to come, I know that each sunrise brings with it the promise of renewal, and that every moment, no matter how painful, has led me to this point of unyielding strength. I still remember the moment I closed that door behind me as if it were seared into my memory, a moment when the weight of a decade's worth of heartbreak and betrayal finally lifted. That night, as I sat in our warm, softly lit living room with Elena by my side, the ghost of my past receded just a little more. I felt not only relief but an unyielding certainty that every painful twist and bitter betrayal had led me to this moment of transformation and quiet triumph. The echoes of my best friend's derision now only fueled my resolve. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, turning scars into stepping stones, and I was finally free. In the days and weeks following that fateful encounter, I immersed myself in the rich tapestry of my new life. Elena and I began to craft routines that celebrated our resilience. Sunrise walks in the park, evenings spent discussing art and literature, and countless quiet moments of mutual understanding over steaming cups of coffee. Our home, once marred by memories of betrayal and shattered dreams, blossomed into a sanctuary of creativity, healing, and hope. Yet, as is often the case, the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected. One chilly autumn afternoon, while Elena and I were hosting a small gathering for friends at our home, a celebration of new beginnings and honest conversation, a familiar face appeared at the doorway. I recognized him immediately. Jason, my best friend turned nemesis, had come uninvited to our celebration. His arrival sent a ripple of tension through the room, and for a fleeting moment, I could feel old wounds stirring. But then, as he stood awkwardly in the threshold, I saw something unexpected in his eyes: regret, perhaps even humility. Jason hesitated, his gaze flickering. Part 2, Triumph in the Aftermath. I still remember the moment I closed that door behind me as if it were seared into my memory, a moment when the weight of a decade's worth of heartbreak and betrayal finally lifted. That night, as I sat in our warm, softly lit living room with Elena by my side, the ghost of my past receded just a little more. I felt not only relief but an unyielding certainty that every painful twist and bitter betrayal had led me to this moment of transformation and quiet triumph. The echoes of my best friend's derision now only fueled my resolve. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, turning scars into stepping stones, and I was finally free. In the days and weeks following that fateful encounter at my doorstep, I immersed myself fully in the life Elena and I were forging together. Our home transformed into a sanctuary of healing, a place where the past was acknowledged but no longer permitted to dictate the future. We spent mornings wandering through sun-dappled streets, afternoons in the local library poring over books that nurtured our newfound passions, and evenings experimenting with recipes that filled our kitchen with laughter and warmth. Each moment was a quiet victory over the ghost of betrayal that had once loomed so large. The journey, however, was not without its challenges. There were days when old memories crept in unbidden, when the bitterness of Jason's betrayal and the cruelty of watching him mock my single status in the past threatened to pull me back into a dark well of regret. On those days, I would retreat into my journal, pouring my pain and confusion onto the page until the hurt began to dissolve into words that made sense. I learned that healing was not about erasing the past but integrating it into a richer tapestry of who I had become. Every scar was a story, every painful memory a reminder of the strength I'd had to muster to survive. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I prepared for a modest gathering at our home, a celebration of resilience and new beginnings, a knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Jason standing there, his posture uncertain, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and something else I couldn't immediately place. The room fell silent as he hesitated on the threshold. "Hello," he began, his voice low and measured. I heard about your new life, and I wanted to talk." For a long moment I stood there, caught between old wounds and the resolve I had fought so hard to build. The memory of his betrayal still stung, yet I realized that this was an opportunity, a chance to reclaim my narrative fully. I stepped aside, allowing him into the room where Elena and a few close friends gathered, all of whom looked on with a mixture of curiosity and quiet support. Elena met his gaze with a calm understanding that only deep empathy could offer. We settled into a quiet corner away from the crowd, and Jason cleared his throat. "I know I can't change the past," he said, voice trembling with a sincerity that I had rarely seen in him before, "and I know I caused you pain beyond measure. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I regret what I did. I was foolish, and in my arrogance, I destroyed something I should have cherished." His words hung in the air, fragile and raw. For a moment, I considered unleashing the torrent of emotions that had festered inside me for years. Instead, I took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Jason, I spent years believing your betrayal defined me, that your actions were the measure of my worth. But I've come to understand that my worth isn't determined by your choices. I've learned to rebuild and to find happiness despite the pain you caused." My voice was steady, resolute, a testament to the man I had become. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes as if the weight of his own guilt had finally caught up with him. "I truly am sorry," he said. "I saw you again at that gala and heard the whispers of your new life. I never imagined you'd be so whole. It made me realize what I lost, not just in you but in myself." In that quiet conversation I found closure, not because I forgave him entirely, but because I acknowledged that his remorse was his burden to bear. I told him that his apology, though long overdue, was a step toward his own healing, and that my journey was far more important than his regret. I expressed that I had built a life rich in love, self-discovery, and quiet triumph over adversity, and that the person he once derided was now a man transformed by his own scars. After our conversation, Jason left without another word, his departure as quiet and unassuming as his arrival had been. The room slowly warmed with the return of friendly chatter, and Elena took my hand as we rejoined our friends, their supportive smiles affirming that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Over the following months, I continued to thrive in the new life I'd built. Elena and I traveled to distant cities, marveled at art in hidden galleries, and even started a small project together, a community art initiative aimed at helping others express their stories of resilience. The initiative became a beacon for those who had faced their own betrayals and heartbreaks, a place where vulnerability was celebrated and every scar told a story of survival and hope. I found that in sharing my journey, I could help others see that pain did not have to be a dead end but could instead be a crucible in which new strength was forged. In quiet moments of reflection, I would sometimes revisit my journal entries, the raw, unfiltered pages that bore witness to my darkest days. I saw the transformation, the gradual shedding of bitterness, and the emergence of a man who had learned that every ending was simply the prelude to a new beginning. I began to understand that the irony of life was not that my best friend had once stolen my rich fiancé and mocked my single status, but that it ultimately led me to discover a love far richer and a life far more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. I also learned the value of forgiveness, not for the sake of those who had wronged me, but for my own peace of mind. Forgiveness became a liberating force, a way to release the grip of past hurts so that I could fully embrace the present. I forgave not because I condoned Jason's actions or the betrayal that had so nearly broken me, but because I recognized that harboring resentment would only continue to chain me to a past that no longer defined my worth. One quiet winter evening, as I sat by the fire with Elena and listened to the soft patter of snow against our window, I realized that the journey from despair to hope had been arduous, yet every step had led me to this place of contentment. I recalled the long nights of solitude, the tears shed in the dark, and the agonizing loneliness that once threatened to consume me. Those memories were still there, like delicate scars on my soul, but they no longer ached with the same intensity. Instead, they glowed faintly, a reminder that I had survived, grown, and emerged stronger. In time, I began to see that life's most profound lessons are often learned through the deepest wounds. The betrayal of my best friend, the loss of my rich fiancé, and the bitter mockery of my single status were chapters in a story that had ultimately led me to a life overflowing with genuine connection, love, and self-discovery. Elena's steady presence and the kindness of those around me became my compass, guiding me through the lingering shadows of the past toward a future filled with promise and possibility. My journey was not one of simple closure but of transformation. I learned that every person we lose, every betrayal we suffer, is a lesson in disguise, a chance to reassess our values, redefine our identity, and rediscover the strength that lies within us. I realized that true wealth is not measured in riches or status, but in the depth of our experiences and the authenticity of our relationships. In losing what I once thought was my destiny, I found something far more valuable. A life that was truly mine, built on resilience, self-acceptance, and the courage to love again. As I stand here today, looking back on the twists and turns of my journey, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. I am grateful for the heartbreak that taught me to value my own worth. I am grateful for the betrayal that forced me to confront my vulnerabilities. And above all, I am grateful for the love I found, a love that came not from the shadows of a stolen future, but from the light of new beginnings. One final encounter with Jason, brief and unplanned, sealed the transformation I had long worked for. I saw him once more at a public event, far removed from the intimacy of our earlier confrontation. His eyes briefly met mine, and in that fleeting glance, I sensed an unspoken acknowledgement. Perhaps he recognized, as I had come to realize, that the person he once derided was no longer the broken soul he remembered, but a man who had risen from the ruins of betrayal to embrace a life filled with authenticity and grace. That day, as I walked away from the event with Elena by my side, I felt the crisp autumn air fill my lungs with the promise of renewal. I knew that the scars of my past would forever be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they were the markers of a journey that transformed betrayal into wisdom, loneliness into self-discovery, and despair into the unwavering belief that even after the deepest wounds, love can be reborn. Now, as I close this chapter of my life and look toward a horizon painted with the colors of hope and endless possibility, I do so with a heart that is open, resilient, and profoundly alive. The echoes of the past no longer haunt me. Instead, they remind me that every ending is but the start of something extraordinary. My best friend's betrayal, once a source of endless sorrow, has become the catalyst for a future that is richer, deeper, and more meaningful than I ever dared to imagine. I stand here, a man who has transformed his pain into power, who has found love in the unlikeliest of places, and who now lives each day with a renewed sense of purpose. The journey has been long and arduous, but with every step I take, I honor the lessons learned along the way. My scars are not symbols of defeat, but badges of honor that testify to the strength of the human spirit and its capacity to heal, to love, and to rise again. This is my story, the story of how betrayal and loss paved the way for rediscovery, how every painful twist led me to a place of fulfillment and genuine happiness. And as I embrace the promise of tomorrow, I do so with the unshakable conviction that, no matter what the future holds, I will continue to write my own destiny, one filled with courage, compassion, and the timeless beauty of new beginnings. The past may have been marked by betrayal and heartbreak, but the future is mine to create. A future built on resilience, love, and the unyielding belief that even after the deepest wounds, the light of hope shines ever brighter.